Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I am Abe with MysticGenMara.com, and today I would like to introduce you, or maybe explain some more about it, the concept of intuition. Intuition is defined as a natural ability or power that makes it possible to know something without any proof or evidence. So this is that knowing without knowing thing. Or it's the other dictionary definition is a feeling that guides a person to act a certain way without understanding why. And there's times you just get those compulsions, and this is part of your intuitive knowledge. It comes from the Latin verb inturi, and I may be saying that wrong. I googled it, but again, I'm not Italian, so which means it considers or sees. Late English. It was intuit, which was to contemplate. So these are all tools of the mind. Although if you work with the energy bodies and the chakra systems, you'll find out really quickly that your intuition is actually rooted in your third eye as well as in your solar plexus and sacral. It's kind of anchored throughout your chakra system in reality, but there's different aspects of it that show up in different areas. So this is that inner gut feeling. When you know something, but you haven't been told, it's not something that you've read, it's not something that you've learned, but you know it without question. That's this type of a knowledge. Parents are great for this when their kids are in danger or when they're not telling the truth. The other one is a mother's intuition, or a mother always knows. I have seen in my life, and if you talk to my mom, she'll tell you that she's had this experience where they just know before an accident happens that it's going to be there, and they're like en route when the accident occurs with their kid, or when their problem shows up, they're already headed that direction before it's even finalized. It's really amazing how that intuition works with parents. And there's times, and I've had this happen personally, where you'll hear a voice, someone will call your name, someone will be like, stop, and you'll look around like, what just happened? Because there's no one around you, or you're in your car and your radio's off, but you'll hear someone say, stop, turn here. Something weird like that, but in reality, it's not really that weird. It's your intuition warning you. Sometimes your intuition will be used or guided by your angels or your spirit guides, or by divine God source energy will come through, and they will do this to catch your attention because you're not listening to the still small voice, so they get louder about it. And it's flashes of insight. Like if you're in an argument or you're in a discussion and all of a sudden you start seeing this pattern emerge, or it appears like there's a pattern emerging, so you start just going with that intuitive guidance, that gut instinct that I'm just going to go with this thought. A lot of the times you can tap into a source of knowledge through the Akashic Records, through the ether, however you see that energy, and you can start to really tap into a vast store of knowledge through your intuition, but it's allowing you to lower your ego so that your subconscious and your intuitive mind can step forward and actually do the work. And it takes a lot of practice to get to that point. And practices that you can use are things like meditation and quieting the mind, being very mindful, like living in the now moment. Those are ways to really awaken your intuition. There's classes you can take and courses that are specifically focused on awakening your clairvoyance, your the clairs in general. And when I mention the clairs, we'll just move into that real quick. In the metaphysical sense, these are the specific types of an intuitive ability. And intuition can sometimes be called psychic, but thanks to some of those less than savory characters out there, that word has some very negative connotations. It's starting to be cleaned up, which I am super happy about, because that actually is something that more people would understand just by saying it out loud than intuition or gut instinct. Because a lot of people hear that and they think, usually it's a parental thing, or it goes into a spiritual sense, whereas the term psychic tends to just be the gifts. So Get my notes here. I know how to use the clairs and I know about them, but trying to remember which one is which takes a little bit sometimes. And so the clairvoyance is when you're seeing with your inner eye, your third eye activation. When you're seeing the colors, you're seeing the shapes, you're seeing the glow around somebody. That's when you're doing clairvoyance, because it's clear seeing. Clairaudience is when you hear with your inner ears. Sometimes it's these, but sometimes you're hearing through your throat chakra, which is your communication chakra. And the clairaudience means clear hearing. So you're actually hearing things that other people are missing. Sometimes when you really start to develop it, you'll notice that you'll hear something about the same time, that especially if you have a cat or a dog in the house, that they are hearing something, because they'll look towards the wall and you're like, there's nothing there, but you can hear it. And that's the type of thing that you're tapping into. Clairsentience is physically feeling an energy field or a solar plexus through your solar plexus chakra. And clairsentience is clear knowing, because you're sentient. That's knowledge, that's consciousness. So when you're able to see it like that, you're actually able to feel that energy or become aware of it, I think is the exact definition. But it's a physical feeling. It's not just using your inner eye. It's not just using your throat chakras. It's a physical energy field that you can feel. And if you are someone who has had Reiki treatments and you can feel that energy flowing around, if you can feel the energy moving, that's part of your clairsentience stepping up. Clairempathy is not one that I personally tend to work with, because I feel like empathy can just be by itself, but it's clear feeling. It's being able to feel another person's emotions. Generally, you'll feel this in your heart chakra, although it can show up in other chakras as well, especially if it's a draining thing. And that's when you need to step back, because you don't want to be drained doing any form of spiritual work. But empathy is the ability to feel what another person's feeling, putting yourself in their shoes. But the thing you have to be careful with any form of empathy, and this is where meditation really steps up as the tool you want to use, because an empath that is ungrounded and unshielded will literally collect every single thing around them. It affects them in such a way they become heavy, they become stressed out, they get depression, and they're not sure why, but a simple basically energy clearing, and it's not always simple when you're working with empaths that have been unaware and literally drawing other people's emotions on them, but clearing that out will really actually physically have an effect on that person. And so if you are working with empathy, you really want to stay grounded, and you really want to work with meditation to get your mind, your conscious, and your subconscious to work together, because that way you can hold space for somebody, but they don't invade your space. And that's really super important when you work with empathy. The last one is claircognizance, which is knowing unknown information. This is tapping into your crown chakra. And claircognizance is how you really start to get into that state of knowing things that you've never studied, you've never heard about. It really does trigger out of your crown, and that's how you access your Akashic records. It's how you access the astral plane, the etheric plane, all these different levels of reality and consciousness. It's through claircognizance, and that's when you bring in those bursts of insight. And that's really a lot of your people who do channeling. It's through claircognizance, because they're bringing in information, sometimes entities, and that's a story for a different day, but it's bringing in that information that you wouldn't have normally known. Intuitive insights can also be attributed to genetic memory, which is through your DNA. Specifically, from my research, it comes through both, but they're really starting to notice a pattern through the maternal DNA, which is your mitochondrial DNA. They're starting to find out that people who do past life regressions, and this one's touchy because sometimes you'll get a charlatan that's just telling you stories and you're going with it, but the genuine regressive past life experiences are attributed to a genetic form of who you are. We only know about 5 to 10% of what our DNA is actually for. Well, that means there's 95 or 90% of it we don't have a clue. and they call it junk DNA. Well, there's a theory, and I tend to agree with this, that the DNA we don't understand is actually our genetic memory, and it's access to things that happened before us in both sides of our family, our maternal and our paternal side. But I also feel, and there's, like I said, there's a theory out there that goes with this, that it may actually be an embedded code for our species that helps us grow and develop. And so your genetic memory is really super important, especially considering it's attached to your DNA, and your DNA is really what makes you a physical being in the sense that we know. And so that's something to be aware of. And that's why you want to try to be more healthy, drink fairly good amounts of water, do sun baths and lunar baths in the moon, where you just be out in the sun and the moon for a period of time to help recharge your DNA and your RNA and all that fun little stuff, because it does actually have a positive effect just by being out in the sun, being out in the moon. It does affect your DNA. Intuition is also how your angels, your guides, and divine God source energy contacts us. Sometimes you'll actually be able to have a conversation with your angels and you can hear it through your clairaudience. Sometimes you'll be able to see your angels, and it's really interesting when you really start to develop your third eye, especially. But you're working with meditation and you're doing guided meditations, and you start to actually communicate with the spirit realm, because it really activates and elevates all of your different clairs or your intuition to a higher and higher state, where even in the waking state you can start to have these communications that are two-way, not just you're going to say a prayer and go on with your day. You can say your prayer and then you can actually hear a response. You can have those really intensive communications, because even if you look back to what, in the Bible, they had prophets who would have direct communication, but they had to go through the priesthood. That has not always been the case, and it's shifting away from that now, where we actually can make those communications with the divine, with the spirit realm. But we've been trained for so many years that these gifts aren't real, or they're bad, or whatever this current story is. But the reality is, we have these gifts, and we're starting to reawaken to them. And so this is something that is, to me, is really close to home, and that's why I'm trying to bring as much of this information forward as I can for you. The human mind has abilities that we are literally still discovering. And this is one talent that's been around as long as history has recorded, and it's been different names. It's psychic, it's intuition, it's your gut instinct, it's enlightenment, it's fill in the blank. There are a ton of different names. Ancient systems of thought valued intuition as high or higher than reason and logic in a lot of cases. Hindu teachings, Buddhist teachings, Greek, Roman, and many, many others valued intuition and psychic abilities as the highest form of mental skill. Daniel Kahneman is a modern-day psychologist, thinks that the intuition is the ability to automatically generate solutions without logical argument or evidence. I actually kind of like that, because you start to look at a solution versus looking at the problem, and then you can make those leaps, sometimes amazingly powerful leaps, to find these solutions. People that you can compare this to, people like Albert Einstein. You can compare this to Nikola Tesla. These people would see a solution, and then they would work from that solution back. And they would make leaps of technology, of science, of thinking, of reason, that if you looked at the problem and tried to find the solution, you'd never do it. There was different, Tesla did make a comment in one of his journals that he was in radio contact with someone from, he assumed, the planet Mars. He may have been, but he had tuned his mind to be able to receive that information, which is a form of intuition. So there's a lot here that you can use and research, and it's not been hidden, it's just been degraded by a lot of psychologists and scientists. And when I say degraded or demeaned, Sigmund Freud and his contemporary Carl Jung thought intuition was a joke. They found it illogical, which I guess is kind of the point, because using logic and reason, you're not making these huge jumps in technology. No one has done that. It's always been an intuitive, wait a minute, if I just do this with no reason for it, and a lot of the times it comes out great. Not always. Sometimes it blows up in your face, but that's how a lot of our technology has moved forward. Intuition is also attributed to the use of divination tools. The ones that I prefer are tarot cards, oracle cards. I love my pendulum. I use it for a lot of different things, but it's a way when my mind is too cluttered and I can't hear, I can use a pendulum, and it's like muscle testing. And so the answer will still come through even when my mind is just totally on a warpath with something else. There's things like scrying, staring into a black mirror, staring into a pool of ink, which is what Nostradamus used to do. There's also water scrying, where you go out to a lake or a pond and you use that body of water in the moonlight as your scrying tool. There's a lot of ways you can actually scry with clouds. I'm not good at that, just to be clear, but there is a way you can use that. And then dowsing, which is your pendulums, using the copper rods, things like that, which is a physical way of using intuition. It's when you go to an energy healer or a reader, that's how they hear the spiritual side, or they are scryers and see it. My gifts tend towards the auditory and the being able to feel it and sense it that way. But over the last few years, especially, I've took some classes, and you start to wake up other parts of it, and that's where your third eye, being able to see the auras around people, being able to actually interact in a greater way, in a more conscious way, using your gifts. And to be honest with you, it doesn't matter what spiritual path you're on, whether you're following a baseline religion, one of the Orthodox religions, Catholic, Lutheran, Baptist, Adventist, Mormon, or you're taking an alternative spiritual practice and you're following one of the pagan beliefs, the Druids, the Aboriginals, or Greek, Roman, really doesn't matter as far as I'm concerned in this respect. We all need to learn to use our intuition. Because to me, when you look at things, because I like true crime too, so when you look at some of the cults that have occurred, when you look at a lot of these mass suicides, Jonestown, Waco, things like that, there were signs. If people would have followed their gut instinct, the survivors, the people who got out, said that there was always this feeling inside that there was something wrong. But instead of following it, they followed the charisma of the leader. And this happens politically, religiously, business, can happen in your job. And there's some jobs like firefighting, if you don't follow your gut and you follow somebody else, you can end up in a bad situation. I've seen it happen. And that's why I feel like if we all start tapping into our intuition and really clear the ego out of the way, as a group, your intuition will start to work with each other, and you'll be able to move into these more positive states, and you'll skip some of the negative stuff. And it can be done alone. It's a little difficult. It's doable. But courses and groups are a much more powerful way to work with it. You get your affirmation that you're doing it correctly. There's times when you'll be working with somebody and all of a sudden you'll start describing something and you're like, where is this coming from? Your conscious mind will be saying that. Your subconscious mind is like, it's right there. And so you'll start to get the affirmation that yes, you do have this ability. Yes, you are actually seeing, hearing, feeling, sensing that because you're working with another person. And a lot of the times that person is on a similar journey to you, so it's a good way to get that feedback to know where you need work, where your skill sets are, and how to enhance them. And I do know of a couple of good courses, so if that's something you guys are interested in, if you want to comment below, I can let you know. But there's a lot of really good people out there that'll do it. There's also some interesting people, so you just have to make sure that you find one that resonates with you. And everybody is going to react different, so find their videos, find their YouTube, or Instagram or whatever it is that they have, and just kind of go through it, and you'll know, again, using your intuition, what works with you and what doesn't. If you want to start working on your own, let me find them here. There are these cards called Zener cards. I think it's Zener cards. And I will put a link in the description as to where you can get a set of them. They're not that expensive, $10 to $20, and they vary in decks. Some of decks will be colors, some will be just shapes, some will have both. The deck that I have, I actually think is out of print at this point, and it kind of bums me out because that's the one I like. But I got it about 15, 20 years ago. It's an old deck. But it has all of these, make sure I get the dots, and each one of them is a different color. There's 5 different colors. And then there's also, and that's the colored Zener cards, or Zener maybe. And then there is the shapes version, and I'm trying to make sure I get all the shapes here. And these are the ones, if you've ever watched the Ghostbusters 2 movie, these are the ones that they're talking about, but he uses a bigger version because you can get small homemade versions of these. But they're not homemade, just smaller versions of them. And there's usually 5 distinct symbols that you can use. And the way you work with these cards is you set it up so you have stars, squares, circles, the plus sign, and I think there's some wavy lines in here somewhere. Nope, that's not this deck. Each deck's a little different, like I said. And you'll set up a label in front of each one. So you have one label that says square, one label that says circle, or wavy lines, star, plus sign, whatever. And then the back of the cards is just like a normal playing card deck. And you will shuffle your deck, and there's usually 25 to 50 cards. It just depends on the set you're getting. And you'll shuffle it, and you'll shuffle it, and you'll always have it face down so you don't see anything but the back. And you'll pick up one card without looking at it, and you'll allow your intuition to guide the answer. And you don't look at the card. You just place it under which heading it's supposed to be under, and you'll do that with the entire deck. And set aside a good half an hour to do this exercise, and then go through it and mark down your responses. Inevitably, you're going to get 35 to 50% of it correct just on guessing. It's that's pretty much how it works. And I have a bug that's zipping around in here. It's not spirit orbs. But as you progress and you keep practicing with it, over time you will notice that if you meditate first, your percentage gets better. You'll get 60%, 70%. If you come home and you're frustrated, stressed out from work, and you do it, you're going to drop your success rate down to 20. Practicing it in a meditative after meditation, after prayer, something that calms the mind and brings you down, where your intuition can step forward, you're going to notice that it improves your ability. And over time, if you do this 3 to 5 times a week, which is what I recommend when you're first starting out, you'll notice at the beginning, you're not going to be that, I mean, you might be really super accurate on it, but the likelihood is you're going to hit between 30 and 50% accuracy. But what you'll notice is over time, you're going to start getting a little bit more tuned in. You're going to get a little bit clearer. And if you have the deck that has both sets, pick one set to work with, whether it be the colors or the shapes, and work with that for a full month. And then switch and just see if you are picking up on colors better or if you're picking up on shapes better. Usually, if I was doing a live video for this versus a pre-recorded one, I would actually go through an exercise and we would experiment and play with these a little bit. But I will link in the description one of the decks that I can find to use, and I highly recommend trying them out just to get the experience with them, because they are a lot of fun, and it is a way to test your intuition up front at the moment so that you can start to see where you're at. As always, if you like the kind of content I'm providing, if you want to hit the subscribe button, if this video is something that interested you, I really appreciate the like, and I do respond to comments. All I ask is that you be respectful, because I think we can all use a bit more respect in this world. So, Have fun, get yourself a deck of the Zener cards if you can, and if not, you can actually find templates online to make your own. Just make sure that you can't see through the paper and don't use Sharpies. Use colored pencils or something. That way you can't cheat and be like, oh look, I'm doing good, but you can see through the page. Use a card stock to make them. But you can do it that way, or you can buy a set. It's up to you. Experiment and see what happens. And with that, I will talk to you guys in a future video, and I hope you have an awesome week.